Yeah, so it's like, as I've tried to think this through and compare what will likely happen now to what Blizzard would want, all of that stuff, I don't think 9.3 can exist. And I'm not saying that in a way to really blast Blizzard for it. I mean, it sucks for them as well, but I just don't see 9.3 happening. Now, it is important to say that whenever Ian said that they weren't doing, I think Mike basically asked Ian, are you going to do a Warlords of Draenor again?
Yeah.
And that would basically just mean 9.1 is the final patch of the expansion. Ian said no to that. So a 9.2 is going to happen. Tier sets probably. So that's pretty hype. That's exciting, right? 9.2 the tier sets. Happy about that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean there has to be a 9.3. Ian never said there'd be a 9.3 or that it would follow other expansions. All he said is they weren't doing a WoD. And WoD was one major content patch and then run off to Legion. So Shadowlands is not going to do that. And if you think about the timings of these expansions, Shadowlands really only has room for 2 major patches at their current cadence, while also having the next expansion come out roughly 2 years. And it's actually interesting then, because would Shadowlands actually be one of our shorter expansions? If it only ends up being, say, a year and 11 months?
Yeah, without...
or then, is it a situation where they actually do a patch 9.3? And then, who knows? Maybe it's Q1 2023 for World of Warcraft's next expansion. Because usually it's a year after BlizzCon, just under a year after BlizzCon. So if it was a BlizzCon line, February 2022, that would be vaguely reasonable to have a Q1 2023 release date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of the different factors line up in a way that it's like, it's difficult to find the line where the bean counters won't force them to release something like they did with Reforged, where it's just, is this ready? No, too bad. Too bad we put the release date in your mouth and now you have to swallow it. Yeah. Obviously, like, that was... I can't imagine they'll make the same mistake. I would hope so, because obviously I'm sure people who made that decision are now looking and going, whoops. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Blizzard Entertainment's entire reputation. We didn't mean to flush you down the toilet.
Yeah.
So it is the case of how little can they get away with content-wise that doesn't wreck their entire plan for story and stuff. Because if we have another N'Zoth, I think that will be a very, very bad look, to put it lightly. Yeah,
so in my head, it's going to be Sylvanas and whatever in this patch, Jailer the next patch, Shadowlands is over. I feel like that's probably going to be it, and I think that'll be tricky because I think they probably would have wanted a 0.3 patch, and they would have wanted the room to tease future expansion stuff quite a bit more.
Yeah.
But they're not going to get that, I think, anyway.
It's really dire unless they can... Well, I guess a lot of what we're saying is down to based on what their actual ability to make content is at the minute. Because obviously if it takes them 6 months to deal with catching up from Shadowlands and then get on to 9.1, which I imagine a lot of the problem for 9.1 taking so long reasonably or comparatively is likely to do with the fact they couldn't plan for it. Where, you would want to have 9.1 like almost set in stone and going on full pelt when Shadowlands launches, so you're not starting from scratch and scrambling. But they scrambled to get Shadowlands out.
Yes, they clearly had no pre-production, but like they didn't have... It's not like, say, with, I believe, Miss of Pandaria and Legion, where the first patches were basically done at launch. Yeah. I mean, Return to Karazhan was obviously done well in advance.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say about Legion. It's a case where, like, they need to buy themselves that time to work ahead again, to get back ahead after they've been knocked out. And whatever's happened, they haven't done that. Yeah. And it's like... Obviously, you can't just go, well, we need to make more content. All right, spend more money, scale it up. You can't just do that. Like, you can't do that.
Ramp up time is too much.
Yeah, you can't do that in the best of circumstances. Like, if you have a perfect, like, amazing team with impeccable tools, people will still need ramp up time. But you're thrown into Blizzard, and I imagine, like, everything involving their culture and how old World of Warcraft is at its core, there's probably a lot of things you need to learn.
Yeah.
Like, you can't come from... You can't come from another place in the industry and go, right, well, I'll get straight on to, like, you're not making like dungeon bosses the same day you join the team.
Yeah, it's like, even if it's not WoW, like even if you're moving from, two companies, they're both using Unity,
Yeah.
but they're going to have their own tools they've made. They're going to have their own practices. All of that stuff, their own different pipelines or whatever. So even in good cases, when you're using an off-the-shelf engine, you can't just immediately go full pelt at the start. Mm-hmm. With Warcraft, I mean, it's going to be even more specified and custom. Yeah. So their ramp-up times, it's going to be probably worse than in most other segments of the industry because of that.
Yeah,
I think that does mean that any brain drain that happens is like extra. It's like an extra sting.
Yeah,
because WoW development is probably quite specific. Yeah. As compared to a lot of other things.
It's like losing the big names is pretty bad, but if they end up losing like kind of the more workforce people who actually make a lot of the content, because I have no idea. I know, like, when was it that said their team was the biggest it had ever been? Was that at some point before Shadowlands, I think, in an earnings call or something like that?
It's probably true.
Yeah, so you're wondering how's that not resulted in more content? And, obviously, as we went over the IGN report last week, there's a lot of bureaucracy kind of stopping a little bit, a lot of red tape stopping it. But also, these people just need time to ramp up. You can't just throw money at the problem, which means, and they finally got around it, they will have to make sacrifices to build that back up. They will have to say, in order for us to get the next expansion done when we need it done and have the 10.1 progress we need, we will have to cut stuff.
So in that case, I think there are two pathways for World of Warcraft moving forward. Mm-hmm. Pathway number one is we stay roughly at an expansion every 2 years, and we kill patch 9.3. The other option is we do a patch 9.3, but the next expansion is like Q1 2023. And I think as a player, it's really tricky. My personal dislike for core aspects of the design of Shadowlands definitely puts my personal bias at cut and run.
Oh, same.
Unfortunately.
Same.
I don't feel good saying that because I also know that, like, that's disrespecting players' investment in this expansion and its systems and all of that stuff. But it's the kind of thing where it's like, I actually just want to accelerate to a world where, the prospect of playing a multi-spec and getting really deep into the gameplay, where that's not horrible to me. Whereas I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have one-shot characters that have a single purpose. My hunter exists for raiding and dabbling in Mythic Plus being in the next patch. I want to make a warrior. That will only be for PvP, probably only in one spec. So I'm not going to face the issues of Shadowlands when I play that way, but I know that, like, based on how I used to play what I'd want to do in the past, that's really not how I ideally want to play the game. So I just want to get out of Shadowlands for that specific reason. It's not to do... I mean, I don't love the setting, and I don't love the narrative, because I'm still of the opinion we never should have went to the Shadowlands. We never should have explained the mythos in, like, such a literal way. I think that's...
Yeah.
You can world build the specific details of your universe to the point where it's no longer fantastical because you've just made it all seem explained, and all that. So I just kind of want to get out of Shadowlands, I guess. So that's definitely my bias. Even though I think the thing that could... Maybe it would be best for player experience if they did stick to the course and do a patch 9.3. So it's hard to say. I know where my bias is, though, and that is get us onto 10.0, and please, for the love of all that is good in the world, let's not have 10.0 be a cosmic world-building expansion, because I really think what the players want is Warcraft. And what Warcraft is it is elves in the forest, it's orcs in the barrens, it's, humans doing some adventuring in, the parts of the realm. Right? That's Warcraft. That's where this franchise came from. There's little sprinklings of sci-fi and stuff with, like, the Warcraft 2 expansion. Yeah. But no. So basically, if we just cut off Shadowlands by doing 2 patches, and then maybe next, say, August, September, October, get a new expansion that kind of is able to take us back to basics. I mean, it's that thing MoP wanted to do. Because with MoP, they were all like, you people have been stopping world-ending threats for so long. Let's have an expansion different. Like, somebody in chat just said no BFA 2. You see, that's Tajir Games. I'd say to you there, I really want that return to basics, and I don't think that BFA at all was a return to basics. BFA was like trying to trade on people's love of traditional Warcraft, but it completely failed to actually evoke any of that. Like, the best, most Warcrafty feeling content is basically the descriptions on the mission table, because that's where the actual Battle for Azeroth happened.
Yeah, because that was at r/Warcraft lore post, wasn't it?
I mean, that popularized it recently, but I mean, we knew that for ages.
Yeah, but that's a way for people to see it. It's someone on the Warcraft lore subreddit pointed out they didn't really understand how the Alliance had or how bad the Horde had it in that war until they went and read all the descriptions. And it turns out the Alliance made massive ground across Kalimdor, but there was no content that ever showed us that.
Yeah, it was never, WoW is supposed to be a virtual world. The Battle for Azeroth was basically never reflected in said virtual world. Alex Afrasabi, man known for firing cannons, he said that cannon would be fired. Funny enough, I don't know, maybe he got fired because we've all noticed he's not at the company anymore.
Yep.
But that cannon never got fired. Right? In a shower, and you're like, what went on? What? So anyway, weird stuff about BFA aside, I think that's what WoW needs if it's going to get back to a healthy spot.
Yeah, I think to finish off the BFA comparison, I think they wanted that but couldn't execute on it more than anything else. Like you say, they traded in the idea. So it's not that going back to basics would result in another BFA. It's that BFA tried that and wasn't successful at it. So a successful version of that, where it actually focuses on it correctly, instead of weaving in all the later stuff and having no actual world content.
Yeah, well, it's that thing.
The victory.
We don't want this thing where WoW's in-game storytelling is like the worst of Zack Snyder. Which, we mentioned this before, where it's like they have their epic bits and they just focus on doing their epic bits, but they never give it enough time to actually just, room to breathe between it all, which is why you get a BFA situation where it's just like bam, 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 and you're like whiplash, right? Mm-hmm. We just need an expansion that is basically old and slow, but with lots of excellent content. So that's what I really want. Yeah. Either way, I think that those two options are basically all they can do with WoW. And certainly, me as a player, because of my issues with Shadowlands, I would prefer a cut and run. I think the bean counters at Activision Blizzard would also prefer a cut and run, because if you look at Blizzard's financial incentives, where are their humongous revenue spikes? It's not really at patch launches. It is at expansion launches.
Yeah, so they would nearly be better off getting rid of patches and just bouncing expansion to expansion.
Yeah, the best thing for WoW as a business would basically be yearly expansions with one or two major content patches, two minors. And that is something Blizzard actually did a humongous push to try to achieve,
of course, with
in the Mists of Pandaria period. I think Tom Chilton was the big internal warrior of that. I remember reading that somewhere. Or at least it was Tom Chilton saying they would like yearly expansions. Now that obviously backfired entirely. And I only bring that up not as an advocate for that, but because it explains the financial side of things pretty well, where WoW is totally just humongous spike, lock in 6 months, get a patch, lock in the next 6, but it is those expansion spikes that even look at how Activision Blizzard talks about WoW in their earnings calls. It's the spikes that they want.
Yeah, which I think results in I think it was either last week or the week before we were talking about this in a little bit of depth, but because I agree that a cut and run's probably the best thing all in all, but my personal fear is that will teach them, especially after it was successful for Legion. It'll be successful now for different reasons, because they don't have Legion already, they don't have work done on another expansion, unless they do and they're hiding it from us, which would be so stupid. But because obviously we understand that Legion, obviously Return to Kara being so early means they clearly had stuff done, and then they cut it short and spent loads of time getting it all. That's why Legion had that content, because they had the time to build it before they needed to throw it out. And I feel like if they cut and run, but they're scrambling to cut and scrambling to run again,
okay, yeah,
it's going to teach them the same lesson, which is don't actually stick to what you're doing correctly. Just roll a bunch of dice and go, new expansion, there's a load of new shit, come back please. But that's not, that is not actually, maybe in a cynical way, if people are just going to go, new expansion, whatever, maybe it will work. But for the overall health of the franchise and the experience, I think that's a terrible thing for them to learn. I would be afraid of running it because
Like-
I almost think it would be better if they just went 9.3, 9.4, 9.5. We're going to stay in the Shadowlands till you fucking like it.
Yeah, I think undoubtedly an expansion every 3 years. Hell, an expansion every 4 years, but with loads of patches. That is what would be best for the game.
Yeah, increase the scope of an expansion.
Yeah.
And then maybe their patches will start to feel like expansions and drive those spikes up a little bit. Or maybe they won't need spikes because it won't go, whew. Maybe it'll go up and go, we're still here.
Yeah.
I'd love to see other live service games chart in the same way. Because I imagine a lot of them are that kind of spiky model. But I'd love to see which ones are the more, up and steady.
Yeah.
I'd love to see those.
It's funny, we just got a super chat donation from a Stephen Williams, and it's just making me think, that is the name of Boogie. How long is it going to be until we're sitting here doing Francis? You know, not not doing Francis as like funny satire, but unironically we start turning into Francises.
I mean,
Oh man, remember those videos? Those were the days.
my desk downstairs has taken some poundings. Like,